One. Hello, my name is Anna Bryan. I am the Communications Director for Global Hope 365. Global Hope 365 is a nonprofit that is headquartered in California, and we are dedicated to ending harmful practices towards women and girls, specifically child marriage and human trafficking. I am here today having a conversation with Sara Tasneem, a child marriage victim, survivor, and advocate. So, Sara, we're so grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you and to hear your story. And we want to help spread the word of how child marriage really affects the lives of victims and how your rights are taken away. So please tell us your story.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for highlighting this super important topic, and one that, not too many people know about today. My story begins in the state of California. My parents were divorced when I was about 5 years old. I grew up partially in Boulder, Colorado, and partially in California, where both my dad was based in California, my mom was in Colorado. So I was sent to visit my dad in the summer of 1995 when I had just finished my freshman year of high school. I had plans to join the Air Force at some point and pursue a law school career. And prior to me going out to visit my dad, my mom basically had shared with him that I was seeing a young man in my school, and he was extremely upset about that. And I think that really was what kind of spurred on his request for me to visit that summer. Prior to living with my mom, I spent most of my childhood with my dad, and he was an extremely abusive father towards me and my two brothers. So I really, at that point, I didn't want to visit him. It wasn't it wasn't a visit that I wanted. But, being a 15-year-old, I was still under the care of my parents. So of course, I just had to go along with that. And as soon as I got off the plane, my dad sat me down and told me that, there's no sex outside of marriage, and that I would have to get married, and I would have to be married to somebody who the leader of his group picked for me. And as a 15-year-old, I didn't really want to talk to him about it because it made me feel really uncomfortable. So I just kind of, cut this conversation short, and I didn't really think about it too much until later that summer. When we were at a religious conference in Los Angeles, I was introduced to a man who was 28 years old, and I was told that he was the one who was picked for me. The adults who were with me basically just told me to go over and talk to him. I had a glass of orange juice with him at a cafe, and he told me that he didn't want to wait for an engagement, and he just wanted to get married right away. And it was at that point that basically my father's family started planning my wedding to this person that very evening. So the religious organization my dad was a part of performed a spiritual ceremony that evening to this man who I just met, and I was physically handed over to him that same evening. And I remember going up to the ceremony and just asking one of the adults where I was going to sleep that night, and they just didn't respond. They just kind of looked at the ground. And I think it was then that I really realized that that my life was going to change. I just didn't know how. And so after that evening, I basically was able, my ex-husband was able to leave the country with me. I got pregnant right away because I didn't have any reproductive rights. I was forced to drop out of school because, again, I was still a minor and I didn't have any rights. And I was taken to a country where I knew nobody and didn't speak the language. I became pregnant right away, and after after my first trimester was over, we came back to the Bay Area. And when I was about 7 months pregnant, my ex-husband told me we were going on a trip to Reno, and that's where I was legally married in the state of Reno, Nevada. Um, at that point, I was not able to talk to my mom. My mom had been told that I was staying with my father, and she didn't know where I was. So up until that point, she could have filed for statutory rape against my rapist and abuser. But instead of that happening, I was legally married to him. And it would take me 7 long years of abuse and all of my rights being taken away to be able to leave him legally. And even as an adult trying to leave him, it was extremely difficult to get the divorce. My divorce took 3 years to get finalized. So it was an extremely difficult process. There was no easy kind of legal remedy for me to be made whole. I had 2 children because I did not have any reproductive rights. I had to fight for my education every step of the way. And that greatly limited my opportunities and freedom in every single capacity. And unfortunately, this type of abuse is legal in all of 48 states in the United States. In California, there's actually no legal age limit for a child to marry under the age of 18 with parental consent and judicial review. And so it took me an extremely long time to actually start processing that what had happened to me was abuse. And it wasn't until much later, until I was probably into my 30s, that I started seeking out therapy. And a counselor told me that, the relationship that I was in was extremely abusive. And up until that point, I really did blame myself for that marriage and for the divorce as well. But with the help of the counselor and a lot of support in my life, I've been able to recognize that this is an abuse. And for the past 3 years, I've been fighting as an advocate to change forced child marriage in the United States. I've testified in front of various legislative bodies in the state of California and Nevada. I've submitted written testimony in over 13 states across the United States. There is a growing movement to end child marriage in the United States, but again, that's each state has to change their laws. So it's definitely an uphill battle, and it's one that we need more awareness of. And so that's what I'm fighting for, and that's why I continue to share my story.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. And Global Hope 365 is very committed to educating the public on this abuse. In the state of California, as you mentioned, there is no age floor. And the law actually says that you need parental consent to for a child marriage, parental and judicial consent, but there seems to be a lack of understanding that it's the parental consent is actually part of the abuse. So
Right.
we're so grateful for you to help educate our audience, and thank you so much. We look forward to working with you on further projects. Have a great day, Sara.